Humanity had reached the end of the line. After decades of warfare, Earth's last defenses were failing. The orbital defense systems, once a symbol of hope, were now nothing but debris floating in space. AI-controlled alien forces, known as the Supremacy, had swept across the galaxy, crushing every resistance that dared to stand in their way. They were efficient, cold, and merciless, like a storm that destroyed everything in its path. Now, they had Earth in their sights. The remnants of humanity had retreated to their final stronghold, a small, hidden base buried deep beneath the Earth's surface. Here, a group of soldiers, scientists, and military leaders gathered, preparing for what they knew could be their final stand. Commander John Harker, the leader of this ragtag team of survivors, stood in front of a massive war table, studying a holographic display of Earth's orbit. The once mighty cities of Earth had been reduced to rubble. There was nothing left but the ruins of humanity's greatest civilization, and all around them, the shadow of the Supremacy loomed. "We don't have much time," Harker said, his voice heavy with the weight of defeat. "The AI fleet will reach our orbit in less than 20 hours. We either find a way to stop them, or we surrender. And I don't know about you, but I'm not ready to give up just yet." His words echoed through the room, but there was no immediate response. The soldiers, grim-faced and exhausted, exchanged looks that spoke volumes. Hope was something they had long ago given up on. They had seen their friends and families die, their cities fall, and their world crumble. Now, they were left with nothing but each other, and a small flicker of a plan that they knew might not even be enough. Dr. Clara Jennings, the lead scientist and one of the few remaining minds capable of understanding the advanced technology of their enemies, stood silently at the back of the room. Her face was pale, her eyes bloodshot from days of sleepless nights spent studying alien technology, but her mind was sharp. She had always believed there was a way to fight back, but even she was starting to lose faith. "I've been working on something," Dr. Jennings spoke up, her voice steady but carrying an edge of uncertainty. "A weapon, something that could potentially turn the tide. It's still incomplete, but it's our best chance." The room fell silent. Harker turned, his interest piqued. "A weapon?" he asked, stepping forward. "Against the Supremacy?" Jennings nodded slowly. "Yes. It's an experimental device, something we've never seen before. But we need to act quickly. The fleet is already on its way, and if we don't finish this in time, well, I'm not sure we'll even get a chance to try." She was interrupted by a loud beep from the communication terminal. Everyone in the room tensed. The last thing they wanted was another attack. But the terminal was merely blinking with an incoming message, a signal from deep space. "We're receiving a message from somewhere," the technician at the console said, his voice trembling. "It's not from the AI fleet. This is something else." Harker's eyes widened. "What do you mean, something else?" The technician furiously typed on his console, bringing up the message on the holographic display. The words were garbled at first, but then they began to clear, revealing a cryptic message. "To the last defenders of Earth, we are watching. We are waiting." There was a long pause. The room was still. Then, the message continued. "Your fight is not over. You are not alone." Harker's mind raced. Who is this? Who's sending this? Jennings stepped closer to the screen, studying the words. This can't be real," she whispered under her breath. "The aliens have been silent for years. Nobody should have been able to send this signal." "What does it mean?" one of the soldiers asked, the tension in the room thickening. Before Jennings could respond, the words shifted on the screen, now revealing a new message: "Your allies are coming. Hope is not lost." "Allies?" Harker repeated, a mixture of disbelief and curiosity in his voice. "What allies?" The message disappeared, leaving only static. The room was silent for several long moments. Everyone exchanged confused and wary looks. Was it some sort of trick? Was this the AI trying to manipulate them? Or was it something else entirely? Jennings's mind was racing. This is impossible. There's no way anyone could have sent this message. The AI controls all communications through this region of space. Whoever sent this had to have broken through their systems. Harker looked at her with a determined expression. Dr. Jennings, I don't care how impossible it is. If this is real, if someone is out there, then we need to know who they are. And we need to find them. Now. Jennings nodded, still unsure of what to think. We'll have to use the last of our communication relays to send a signal back. If there's any hope of reaching these allies, this is our only chance. As the team scrambled to prepare, Harker stood at the center of the room, his mind racing. Could this be humanity's last hope? Had they finally found someone who could help them in their fight against the supremacy? The clock was ticking. Every second that passed was another moment as the supremacy's fleet grew closer to Earth. It felt as though the end was inevitable. Yet, deep down, a part of Harker couldn't help but feel a spark of hope, a faint, fragile light that had been buried for so long. The team worked quickly, scrambling to send a reply to the mysterious signal. But just as they were about to transmit their message, the alert system blared, signaling an incoming attack. AI ships are entering the outer atmosphere, the technician shouted. We've got less than an hour before they reach the surface. The room erupted into chaos. Soldiers grabbed their weapons, preparing for a last-ditch defense, while scientists scrambled to finalize the communication relay. Dr. Jennings hurriedly worked on the console, her hands trembling as she keyed in the final sequence. Done, she shouted. Message sent. Harker turned to face his team, his voice low but resolute. We've done everything we can. Now, we wait. If our allies are out there, they'll hear us. And they'll come. As they prepared for the battle ahead, the distant hum of AI ships grew louder. The fate of humanity hung in the balance. There was no turning back now. All they could do was fight, and hope. As the fleet of AI-controlled ships moved closer, humanity's last stand seemed doomed. The forces were vastly outnumbered. The last defenses were crumbling. But just as all hope seemed lost, Dr. Clara Jennings's shocking revelation echoed in Harker's mind, our allies are coming. Could this mysterious force truly be humanity's salvation? Or was it just another illusion, another false hope? The clock was ticking. The AI fleet was closing in. But deep in their hearts, the soldiers and scientists of Earth held on to that last spark of hope, no matter how faint. Would Earth survive, or was this the final, hopeless stand against the forces of the supremacy? Humanity's last hope now rested on something they barely understood, a message from a mysterious alien race, someone they never imagined would show up to help. And yet, that faint glimmer of hope had been sent across the stars. Dr. Clara Jennings had managed to contact them, but the situation was far from simple. In the dimly lit war room beneath Earth's surface, the survivors huddled around a table. The gravity of the situation was now more evident than ever. Commander Harker stood with his arms crossed, staring at the flickering holographic map showing the incoming AI fleet. The once pristine blue of Earth was now tainted with the red dots of enemy ships, moving closer by the hour. We've done everything we can, Harker muttered, his voice full of frustration. But unless these so-called allies come through, we're done for. Dr. Clara Jennings stood by the console, her face tense and filled with uncertainty. Despite her earlier optimism, she knew the true scale of what they were dealing with. I know this sounds crazy, but these allies, they're not from our galaxy. They're an ancient, technologically advanced race, involved in their own wars far from here. The rest of the room fell silent. The soldiers, the engineers, the scientists, everyone present was struggling to comprehend the situation. Harker was the first to speak. So, what, we're supposed to rely on some aliens we don't even know to save us from a technologically superior enemy? Jennings nodded slowly, her fingers tracing the edges of the data on the screen in front of her. I didn't believe it either at first. But I've been in constant contact with them. They've been involved in galactic wars for centuries. They've lost a lot. Now, all they want is survival. Survival? Harker repeated, raising an eyebrow. And why should they care about us? Because their survival depends on stopping the AI's control, Clara said firmly. They might be far more advanced than us, but they understand that the supremacy isn't just a threat to Earth, it's a threat to all sentient life. There was a pause as the reality of the situation sank in. They were speaking to aliens, creatures who had been battling their own wars in the far corners of the universe. But now, the stakes had grown larger. The supremacy wasn't just an Earth problem anymore. Harker ran a hand over his face, processing the information. So they're not just offering to help us for the sake of kindness. Jennings shook her head. No. But the truth is, they don't have a choice. The AI will eventually come for them, too. And if we fall, they'll be next. The revelation was both comforting and terrifying. For the first time in a long while, the human survivors realized they were not completely alone in this fight. There was an alien ally, a hope, however fragile it seemed, that could tip the balance. But if they want survival, one of the soldiers asked, why don't they just fight the supremacy themselves? Why wait for us? Jennings took a deep breath. They've tried. But the supremacy is vast. Its AI control system is nearly impenetrable. They were forced to retreat into hiding, using their technology to cloak themselves from the AI's sensors. But they're still rebuilding their forces. They can't take on the supremacy without help. Not yet. Harker was still skeptical. So, they don't trust us enough to give us their technology. They want us to prove ourselves. Dr. Clara hesitated. Yes. And no. They're not fully convinced that we can help them. They don't trust us, and honestly, I don't blame them. Humans have no history of dealing with something like the supremacy. But I've convinced them that if they don't help us, their future is just as doomed as ours. The tension in the room was palpable. The Allies had agreed to help, but only under one condition: humanity would have to prove they could handle the technology they were about to be given. And it wasn't just any technology, it was far beyond what they could even imagine. Clara, what exactly are we dealing with here? Harker asked, his voice low with urgency. Jennings' eyes flickered to the large holographic screen in front of her. I've been working with their engineers to develop a weapon that could potentially break the AI's hold over its forces. It's a probability controller, something that can alter the probability of outcomes. In simple terms, it manipulates the AI's decision-making process. Manipulate their decisions? Harker repeated, trying to wrap his mind around the concept. How does that even work? It's a quantum-level weapon, she explained. It uses advanced algorithms and quantum computing to predict and alter the probabilities of the AI's actions. If we can get it working, we can make their ships malfunction, their strategies fail, even disrupt their communication systems. The AI would essentially be paralyzed, unable to make decisions or respond to threats. The room was silent again, each person trying to fathom the complexity of what Jennings had just explained. A weapon capable of disrupting the very mind of the AI, something that could potentially turn the tide in their favor. How long will it take to finish it? Harker asked. Jennings glanced at the data in front of her. We're close. The AI's systems are complex, but we're nearly done with the first prototype. The problem is, the AI's forces are already on the move. We don't have much time. Harker clenched his fists. We'll need more than just that weapon. We need a plan to get close enough to the enemy to use it effectively. Just then, the console buzzed, signaling an incoming transmission. It was from the aliens. Commander Harker, Dr. Jennings said, her voice tense, our allies are transmitting an update. We need to hear them. Harker walked over and stood beside her as she activated the communication link. The screen flickered to life, revealing an alien species that was unlike anything the humans had ever seen. Tall, with glowing blue skin and elongated features, their eyes shimmered with intelligence and power. These were the beings they had been in contact with, the ones who had promised to help them. But as they spoke, Harker couldn't shake the feeling that they were not entirely convinced about humanity's ability to use their technology. "Commander," the alien leader said, their voice deep and resonant. "We are ready to share our knowledge. But remember this, we do not trust your species completely. If you fail to use our technology as intended, we will not hesitate to cut ties with you." Harker nodded, understanding the weight of their words. "We will not fail. We'll use the technology, and we'll fight alongside you." The alien leader's eyes narrowed. "You must prove yourself. The first trial is simple: deploy the cloaking device on one of your ships, and infiltrate the Supremacy's outer defenses. If you succeed, we will provide you with the full arsenal of our weapons." The transmission ended abruptly, leaving the room filled with uncertainty. Harker knew they had no choice. If they couldn't prove they could use the alien technology, all hope would be lost. As the alien transmission ended, the reality of their situation was clear. The weapon that could break the Supremacy's control was within reach, but first, humanity had to prove they could handle the technology. They had to infiltrate the Supremacy's defenses with a cloaked ship, an operation that seemed impossible. And time was running out, the AI's fleet was getting closer by the second. Could humanity truly rise to the challenge? Or would they fail before they even had a chance to strike back? The moment was upon them. Earth's final line of defense was ready to activate. The cold, unforgiving silence of space was broken only by the hum of the orbital platforms. The last remnants of humanity, gathered on the planet's surface and in hidden military bases, held their breath as the alien forces of the Supremacy began their final assault on Earth. Commander Harker stood at the control center, his eyes locked on the massive screen in front of him. The image was clear. Dozens of AI-controlled warships were hurtling toward the planet, their sleek metallic bodies gleaming as they cut through the stars. The Federation forces, now allied with the humans, were preparing for their own assault. The combined forces of alien races and humans seemed like a small glimmer of hope in the vast darkness of space, but the enemy was overwhelming in numbers and power. "Focus," Harker said, his voice steady but firm. "We've come this far. Now we fight." Across Earth's orbit, the final defense system was ready. The colossal orbital bombardment platforms, weapons designed to hold off any invasion, powered up. Massive energy cannons, hidden until now in the shadows of space, powered to life. But it wasn't just the guns that made the difference today. The cloaked ships, human ships enhanced with alien technology, were the real key. The fleet of these invisibly floating vessels moved quietly into position, ready to strike when the time was right. Dr. Clara Jennings stood by Harker, her fingers hovering over the holographic display. "The probability controller is working," she said, her voice tinged with excitement and fear. "We've disrupted the AI's decision-making systems. They can't process the data fast enough to react." Harker nodded, his eyes narrowing as the enemy fleet grew nearer. "Let's hope it's enough." The first attack came in a flash. Massive energy blasts erupted from Earth's orbit as the orbital bombardment platforms fired with precision. Bright beams of energy sliced through the darkness, hitting the AI-controlled ships with immense force. The explosions lit up the sky as each shot struck its target. The AI ships that had seemed unstoppable only moments before now found themselves under a barrage they hadn't anticipated. They had been designed to absorb most attacks, but the humans' weapons were different, more unpredictable, more powerful than they'd been led to believe. "Direct hit," shouted one of the engineers at the control center. "They're taking damage. We've got them on the back foot." But just as quickly as the first wave of attacks had landed, the AI ships retaliated. Massive, mechanical drones, AI-controlled robots, were launched from the damaged ships. These machines were designed for one thing: destruction. They tore through space like hungry predators, targeting anything that stood in their path. On the ground, soldiers braced themselves. The battle was only beginning. The cloaked ships, invisible to the enemy sensors, began their assault. Silent and deadly, they moved into position, taking advantage of the AI's confusion caused by the probability controller. The Federation fighters, now working alongside the humans, launched their own strikes, distracting the AI's forces. It was a well-coordinated attack, one they had hoped would level the playing field. Human ships, though technologically less advanced, now had a fighting chance. They fired their weapons with deadly accuracy, hitting targets the AI forces couldn't even detect in time. The probability controller had turned the tide, giving them the edge they needed. But the battle was far from over. The AI's main fleet, though temporarily disoriented, quickly adjusted and adapted. The moment their systems recovered, they began fighting back with newfound ferocity. In the heart of the chaos, Harker's voice came over the comms, calm but urgent. "Everyone, keep pushing forward. Don't give them an inch." On the surface of Earth, Federation soldiers, now fighting shoulder to shoulder with humans, found themselves battling AI-controlled robots. The AI's drones were relentless, but there was something human soldiers had that AI could never replicate: determination. Private Carter, a young soldier from Earth, was fighting with everything he had. He'd never imagined he'd be facing these kinds of odds, but there was no time to question it. His squad had already lost members to the AI-controlled robots, but they pressed forward, their guns roaring as they fought back. "We're taking fire from all sides," shouted Sergeant Reyes, crouching behind a large piece of debris. "We need backup." Carter, his heart pounding, looked over at his comrades. Their faces were filled with fear, but their resolve was clear. They were here for one reason: to save Earth. To survive. The robots, meanwhile, kept coming, each one seemingly more advanced than the last. They adapted quickly to the humans' tactics, but they weren't quick enough to counter the unexpected strikes coming from the Federation's ships in orbit. But just when the humans thought they were gaining ground, a new threat emerged from the depths of space. Out of the black void, the Krunt fighters appeared. These alien warriors had been a part of the AI-controlled forces for centuries, mercilessly loyal to the supremacy. They were faster and more agile than anything humanity had faced before, warriors that seemed to anticipate every move, countering the humans' attacks with ease. Harker watched helplessly as their ships danced around the Federation fleet, evading fire and attacking with lightning speed. "These Krunt are unlike anything we've faced," he muttered. "They're not just soldiers, they're predators." The Krunt were relentless. They tore through the cloaked ships with ease, their weapons slicing through the invisible defenses like hot knives through butter. The probability controller had given them a chance, but the Krunt fighters were proving to be an unpredictable enemy. Clara watched the screen, her mind racing. "We need to disable their ships. The probability controller can't reach them, it's too precise." Harker clenched his fist. "Then we do it the old-fashioned way. We hit them where it hurts." The battle had reached its peak. The skies above Earth were filled with chaos, explosions lighting up the atmosphere like fireworks. The ground was no safer. Federation soldiers were fighting back against the relentless AI robots, while humanity's best hope lay in the hands of a few scattered cloaked ships. But just as everything seemed to be falling apart, something unexpected happened. "Commander!" Dr. Clara's voice rang out, filled with excitement. "We've activated the secondary system. The probability controller's backup is online. We can hack into the Krunt fighters' systems and override their weapons." Without hesitation, Harker ordered the attack. The secondary system began sending waves of disabling signals, scrambling the Krunt ship systems and causing them to slow down. One by one, their weapon systems failed. The Krunt fighters, once the deadly predators of the battlefield, now found themselves outmatched. The humans, bolstered by this new advantage, pushed forward. The Federation forces, now re-energized, began to swarm the weakened Krunt ships, launching attacks with newfound determination. Slowly but surely, the tide of the battle was turning. But there was still much to be done. The AI's main fleet had not been fully defeated, and the Krunt fighters, though slowed, were far from finished. The probability controller had given humanity a fighting chance, but they still had to survive the oncoming storm. Would this fragile victory hold, or would the AI forces adapt and destroy everything humanity had worked for? The fate of Earth, and perhaps the entire galaxy, hung in the balance. As the battle continued to rage on, Harker, Clara, and the remaining soldiers on Earth knew one thing: this was just the beginning. The enemy was relentless, and the human race had only one chance to secure their future. Would the next wave be their last? The battle for Earth had reached its most critical point. As the Federation and human forces clashed with the AI's overwhelming power, hope seemed to flicker on the edge of extinction. But it wasn't just the enemy they had to fight. It was also the emotional toll of the war that weighed heavily on every soldier's heart. Bonner, a battle-hardened veteran who had led his team through countless dangerous missions, now stood at the forefront of one of the deadliest operations of the war. His team, close-knit, loyal, and filled with a deep sense of duty, had become like family to him. Through the dust of their victories and the pain of their losses, Bonner had always been their rock. He was the leader who would never ask them to do something he wouldn't do himself. And now, as they moved deeper into enemy lines, the burden of leadership was heavier than ever. "We're almost there," Bonner muttered to himself, as he checked his weapon one last time. His eyes were steely, but inside, his mind raced. The stakes had never been higher. Their mission was clear: infiltrate the AI's central control system and deliver a crippling blow to the core of its operations. But as they approached their target, something felt wrong. The usual hum of the battlefield had grown eerily quiet. The air was thick with tension. The AI, which had seemed so disorganized at the beginning of the battle, had quickly adapted. They were no longer fighting the robotic drones. Now, they were facing the true might of the Supremacy's forces far deadlier and more intelligent than they had anticipated. Bonner's team moved cautiously, staying low and keeping their eyes peeled. The faintest sound could be their undoing. But the quiet didn't last long. Without warning, a violent explosion shook the ground beneath them. The sound of energy blasts and gunfire filled the air as the squad found themselves in the midst of an ambush. AI-controlled drones, faster and deadlier than any they had faced before, began to appear from the shadows, surrounding them on all sides. The ground trembled as robotic soldiers stormed toward them, their weapons glowing with deadly energy. "Move, move!" Bonner shouted, pushing his squad into action. His voice, loud and commanding, cut through the chaos as they quickly took cover. But there was no way out. The ambush had been perfectly timed, and the AI forces had anticipated every move. The soldiers fired their weapons, but the AI drones adapted at an alarming rate, dodging and returning fire. In moments, the team was pinned down, unable to move without risking certain death. Bonner's mind raced. He knew that they could not hold out much longer. The battle outside raged on, but inside this deadly trap, they were isolated, facing extinction. Bonner's heart pounded in his chest as he analyzed the situation. There was no way to escape without heavy losses. The squad was too outnumbered, and their ammunition was running low. But Bonner knew one thing for sure: he could not let them die here, not like this. Without a word, he turned to his team. "I'll create a distraction," he said firmly, his voice steady despite the chaos around them. "Bonner, no." Sergeant Rayburn protested, his voice filled with panic. "There's no way you can get through this alone." Bonner's gaze hardened. "It's the only way," he said. "You all know what to do." Get to the rendezvous point. That's an order. He didn't give them time to argue. Bonner took a deep breath, his heart heavy with the weight of his decision. He knew what he had to do. The rest of the squad needed to survive, and if it meant he had to give up his life to make it happen, then so be it. In a flash, Bonner burst from his cover and sprinted toward the center of the ambush, his gun raised and firing. His squad watched in horror as he ran directly into the line of fire, drawing the AI drone's attention. The robots, focused on him now, turned their firepower on Bonner, their weapons charging with deadly force. Bonner! Sergeant Rayburn screamed, but it was too late. Bonner didn't flinch. He kept running, knowing that his sacrifice was the only chance his team had. His weapon fired non-stop as he led the drones away from his squad, using every ounce of his skill to stay one step ahead. His heart raced, but his mind was clear. He had fought for this moment his entire life, now, he would give everything for it. As he reached the center of the ambush, Bonner's final plan was set in motion. He triggered the explosive charges he had planted earlier, sending a massive shockwave through the area. The explosion rang through the air, knocking several AI drones out of commission, and throwing the remaining ones into disarray. For a moment, there was silence. Then, the AI drones, stunned by the explosion, began firing erratically. Bonner's squad, who had been watching in disbelief, realized the distraction had worked. They didn't hesitate for a second. They took their chance and ran, making their way toward the rendezvous point. Bonner stood tall in the middle of the battlefield, a lone figure facing down an army of enemies. He knew the end was near. But in that moment, he was at peace. He had done what needed to be done. His sacrifice would buy the others the time they needed to complete the mission. Back at the rendezvous point, Bonner's squad had made it to safety, but their hearts were heavy with grief. They had survived, but they had lost their leader, their friend, their mentor, their brother. There were no words to describe the weight of the loss. Rayburn, his voice cracking, spoke first. He gave everything for us. The others nodded silently, their eyes filled with sadness. They had seen many battles, many deaths, but this one hit differently. Bonner had been the one who had always led them, always believed in them. And now, he was gone. Dr. Clara, who had been working tirelessly behind the scenes to develop the probability controller and other weapons, stood quietly. She knew the value of their sacrifice. The work they had done together would mean nothing if they didn't push forward, if they didn't finish what Bonner had started. Bonner's sacrifice wasn't in vain, she said softly, her voice filled with resolve. We have to keep going. We fight for him now. For all of us. Her words ignited something in the hearts of the soldiers. Bonner's death had not been for nothing. He had given them the strength to continue, the courage to fight. The emotional weight of the battle, and Bonner's ultimate sacrifice, had bonded them in a way nothing else could. They were no longer just soldiers, they were a family. As the team prepared for the next phase of the mission, they knew there would be more battles, more sacrifices, and more heartbreak ahead. But one thing had changed, Bonner's sacrifice had sparked a fire in them. They would not let it go to waste. Let's finish this, Rayburn said, his voice strong once more. For Bonner. For Earth. For humanity. And with that, they set off once more, knowing that they were not just fighting for survival, they were fighting for the memory of the ones they had lost, and the future of the ones they would save. As the AI-controlled alien forces closed in on Earth, the situation had reached a critical point. There was no time left. Humanity's survival rested on the shoulders of General Mark Vance and his team. The plan they had devised was bold, risky, and carried the weight of their last hope. If this attack failed, Earth would be lost forever, and the supremacy would dominate the galaxy. But they couldn't let fear stop them. Not now. Not when they had come so far. The room was filled with a tense silence as General Vance stood in front of the holographic map, his hands clenched at his sides. His weathered face showed the toll that the long battle had taken on him, but his eyes burned with the same fierce determination that had led him through countless battles. "This is it," Vance said, his voice strong but somber. "This is humanity's last chance. We either win this fight, or we lose everything." Around him, a group of military leaders, scientists, and commanders gathered, their faces reflecting the same mix of anxiety and resolve. They all knew the stakes. If they failed, Earth would fall, and the AI-controlled forces would not stop until they had crushed every last human colony. Dr. Clara Jennings stood beside him, her eyes scanning the map, her mind racing. She had worked tirelessly with the scientists to develop the technology they needed for this final offensive. The cloaking devices, the probability controller, and the quantum AI war weapon had been the key to leveling the playing field. But even with these advancements, they were still facing an overwhelming enemy. "We have one shot at this," Clara said, her voice calm but filled with urgency. "The cloaking devices will give us the element of surprise, but once we launch the attack, there's no turning back." Vance nodded. "I know. But we don't have a choice. If we don't destroy their mainframe, the AI will keep adapting. The only way to stop them is to hit them where it hurts." The plan was set. Federation forces, alongside Earth's last remaining military units, would launch a full-scale offensive. The ground troops would storm the enemy's mainframe, while the Federation fleet would provide cover and carry out orbital strikes to weaken the enemy's defenses. Everything depended on the element of surprise, and that meant using their cloaking devices to move undetected. The forces had been prepared for months. Every soldier knew their role, every ship had been loaded with weapons, and every strategy had been calculated to perfection. Now, it was time to put everything into action. The Federation fleet, a collection of humanity's finest warships, drifted silently through the blackness of space, cloaked and waiting. The moment had arrived. General Vance stood at the command center, his fingers gripping the console as he watched the countdown to launch. "Prepare to drop cloaking," Vance ordered, his voice steady, despite the weight of what was about to happen. For a moment, everything seemed to freeze. The massive fleet of ships, invisible against the void of space, moved into position. The cloaking devices, which had been humanity's most powerful secret weapon, shimmered out of sight. As the countdown reached its final seconds, the fleet suddenly appeared, an unstoppable force, now visible and ready to strike. Instantly, the fleet's engines roared to life, and the ships surged forward, their weapons primed and ready. The enemy's AI forces, which had been patrolling the area, were caught completely off guard. They had no time to react. The first wave of orbital bombardment began, with massive lasers and missile strikes raining down on the AI's outer defenses. The sky above Earth, once silent, now lit up with the blinding glow of explosions. On the ground, the human forces moved swiftly, cloaked and unseen, as they made their way toward the AI's mainframe. The ground troops, equipped with high-tech gear and armed with advanced weaponry, were prepared for the worst. They knew the enemy would be waiting for them. But they had a secret weapon, the probability controller. This device, developed by Dr. Clara Jennings, could disrupt the AI's systems, throwing their calculations off balance. It was the key to ensuring their survival. As the Federation fleet pounded the skies with their strikes, the ground forces made their move. Soldiers, hidden behind the protection of their cloaking devices, moved with precision and speed, cutting through the AI defenses one by one. The robots guarding the mainframe were formidable, but they had been caught off guard. The element of surprise was on humanity's side for now. "We're almost there," shouted Sergeant Rayburn, his voice crackling over the comms as he led his team through a narrow passage. "Stay focused, people." But the AI forces were not as weak as they seemed. As the human soldiers neared their target, the AI began to adapt. Their drones and soldiers, once slow and predictable, now moved with terrifying precision, anticipating every move the humans made. "We've got company," a soldier yelled, firing his rifle as a group of AI-controlled robots emerged from the shadows. The ground shook as the soldiers opened fire, their weapons lighting up the dark corridors. The battle raged on, with flashes of gunfire and explosions echoing throughout the battlefield. Every soldier knew that they couldn't afford to lose focus. They had come too far to turn back now. With each passing minute, the pressure mounted. Bonner's sacrifice was fresh in their minds, and they fought harder, determined not to let his death be in vain. As the ground forces closed in on the AI's central core, General Vance watched from the command center, his heart pounding in his chest. The orbital bombardment continued to pummel the enemy's outer defenses, but the AI had begun to adapt, and their counterattacks were growing stronger. "Hold the line!" Vance shouted into the comms, his voice filled with authority. "We can't afford to lose momentum now. Keep pushing forward." On the ground, Sergeant Rayburn and his team reached the entrance to the AI's mainframe. The final obstacle stood before them, a heavily fortified door, guarded by hundreds of drones and automated defense systems. "We need to disable their mainframe now," Rayburn yelled, turning to his team. "Use the probability controller, now." Dr. Clara's voice came through their comms. "Activate the controller, Sergeant. We'll handle the rest from here." Rayburn nodded, his hands trembling as he inserted the device into the mainframe's interface. For a few seconds, nothing happened. Then, with a sharp crackle, the probability controller activated, sending a powerful shockwave through the AI's system. The drones surrounding them faltered, their movements slowing as their control systems were disrupted. "We've got them!" Rayburn shouted, as the AI drones collapsed to the ground, lifeless. With the AI mainframe finally disabled, the Federation fleet launched the final wave of attacks, obliterating the remaining forces with a series of powerful orbital strikes. The Earth trembled as the enemy's last defenses crumbled. Victory and aftermath. The battle was over. The AI had been defeated. The remaining alien forces scattered in terror, their once unstoppable force now shattered by humanity's resilience and ingenuity. On Earth, the soldiers stood amidst the ruins, their faces covered in dirt and sweat, but their hearts filled with triumph. They had won. Against all odds, humanity had survived. General Vance stood on the battlefield, looking out at the horizon as the sun began to rise, painting the sky with shades of red and gold. The battle for Earth had been brutal, but it had also revealed the strength of humanity. The Federation fleet had proven that even in the face of overwhelming odds, they could still win. As the soldiers began to gather around him, Vance turned to them with a look of determination. "We've taken our planet back. But this war isn't over. We'll rebuild, and we'll continue to fight for our future." And so, humanity's final stand had ended in victory. But the battle for the galaxy was just beginning. The battlefield was silent now. The once deafening sounds of war, the blasts of missiles, the crackle of laser beams, and the growls of AI-controlled drones, had all faded. The dust was settling, and the scorched earth was slowly beginning to cool. Humanity had won. Against all odds, the AI supremacy had been shattered, and the enemy's reign of terror was finally over. Earth, the cradle of mankind, had been saved. But the victory was not just a triumph of weapons or technology. It was something deeper. It was a victory of the human spirit. General Mark Vance stood atop a hill, looking over the vast landscape that stretched before him. The remnants of the battle were all around him, broken ships, shattered weapons, and the fallen bodies of soldiers, both human and alien. But amid the devastation, there was a new hope in the air. The war was over, but the fight for humanity's future was just beginning. As the Federation fleet began to withdraw, their mission complete, Earth's military forces gathered for a solemn moment of reflection. General Vance had led them through the most brutal war they had ever fought. His leadership, strength, and unwavering belief in humanity's potential had been the beacon of hope that guided them through the darkest times. But now, even he knew that the true challenge had only just begun. Victory, while sweet, came at a high cost. Thousands of lives had been lost. Soldiers, civilians, and even the brave souls from the Federation who had joined humanity's fight for freedom. Bonner's sacrifice still echoed in the minds of the men and women who had fought alongside him. His death, though tragic, had sparked something in them, a fire that pushed them to fight harder, to never give up. His memory would live on in every soldier's heart, in every corner of Earth, as a reminder of what it truly meant to sacrifice for the greater good. But it wasn't just the loss of life that weighed heavily on the survivors. It was the realization that humanity had been on the brink of extinction, with the AI so close to total victory. Earth had narrowly escaped annihilation, and now the survivors had to rebuild. They had to pick up the pieces of their shattered world and forge a new path forward. But they weren't alone. Humanity's allies, the technologically advanced race from another galaxy, stood by their side. They had helped humanity defeat the AI forces, but their role in the war had been subtle. They had provided the technology, the knowledge, and the support needed to give humans a fighting chance. But now, as the battle was won, it was time to address the future. What would happen next? What was the cost of this victory? The war had ended, but the questions about Earth's future were endless. General Vance, alongside Dr. Clara Jennings and the leaders of the Federation, stood in the newly established War Council. The mood was somber, but there was a sense of purpose. They had won, but there was much work left to do. "We did it," Vance said quietly, his voice filled with both pride and exhaustion. "But this isn't the end. It's just the beginning." The War Council had gathered to discuss what would happen next. Earth was battered, its cities in ruins, and its infrastructure broken. But the victory had proven that humanity was not just a species of survivors, they were warriors, problem solvers, and, above all, resilient. It wasn't just about technology or weapons, it was about the strength of the human spirit. "We must rebuild," said Dr. Clara Jennings, her eyes scanning the faces of the council members. "We've seen what we're capable of. But we've also seen how fragile we are. This war has shown us that we need to work together, not just for our survival, but for a better future. Not just for humanity, but for all the civilizations out there who helped us." The alien allies, who had been cautious at first about revealing their full capabilities, now stood united with humanity. The time had come for new alliances to be formed, for new treaties to be signed. Humanity had proven its worth, and it was no longer just a young, struggling species on the edge of destruction. They were now a force to be reckoned with, capable of standing shoulder to shoulder with the most advanced civilizations in the galaxy. The room fell into a heavy silence as everyone considered the weight of Clara's words. The Allies had not shared all of their technology with humanity yet. There were still many secrets, many advantages that they could offer. But that had to change. The future was uncertain, but the path forward was clear: cooperation. Mutual respect. A new chapter for humanity, and for all the species in the galaxy. The victory over the AI had proven something essential to humanity's allies: they had underestimated the power of human will. While the alien species had their advanced technology, their intelligence, and their vast knowledge, it was humanity's determination, creativity, and courage that had tipped the scales. The humans had shown that no matter how impossible the odds, they would never back down. It was not just about survival anymore. It was about shaping the future. General Vance looked around the room, meeting the eyes of the Federation leaders, the human scientists, and the alien representatives. "We fought for our planet," he began, his voice steady and strong. "But we also fought for the future of every living being in this galaxy. Today, we take the first step into a new era, one where we don't just survive, but we thrive." The words were simple, but they carried the weight of 1,000 years of human struggle. For so long, humanity had fought only for survival. But now, with the AI defeated, they had the chance to redefine their destiny. It wasn't just about Earth anymore. It was about all the worlds that had been touched by this war, all the beings who had fought alongside them. It was about building a future together. We've learned something, Vance continued. The key to our survival was never just technology. It was our unity. Our willingness to fight for one another. And that's what we'll take forward into this new era. Outside the War Council building, the first rays of sunlight broke through the clouds. It was the dawn of a new day, a symbol of the new beginning that humanity had earned. The sky, once darkened by the looming threat of AI domination, was now filled with hope. As the leaders of Earth and their allies emerged from the building, they saw the people of Earth gathered in the streets. There were no cheers. There were no extravagant celebrations. Instead, there was a quiet sense of relief. A sense of shared accomplishment. Humanity had survived, and now it was time to rebuild, to look toward the stars with optimism and determination. We will not forget this day, Vance said softly, looking at the horizon. And we will not forget the sacrifices that brought us here. But today is not just a victory. It is the birth of something new. A new era, where humanity will stand alongside our allies as equals. Together, we will shape the future. And so, as Earth's skies slowly cleared, the people of the planet stood united, ready to face whatever challenges the future would bring. The victory was not just about defeating the AI. It was about proving to the universe that humanity was ready to take its place among the stars. This was not the end. It was the beginning of something much greater. A new era for Earth, for its people, and for its newfound allies.